Things just took a shocking turn for the St. Louis Blues as an NHL insider reveals a surprising trade update around a fan favorite as Doug Armstrong continues listening to offers from other Western Conference teams. This trade report is going to shock fans, and we're here to break down everything you need to know and more in this episode. So, Darius, let's just go straight into it today. Where we know the St. Louis Blues, there's nothing to hide. This team has been struggling, and this has led to Nick Kypreos and Elliot Friedman retweeting this, going in on the top early looks at players available on the market. Now, there's a lot of names that you would see, and I mean, you can see one name in particular, they're in Shen, but things get shocking where a St. Louis Blues team that continues to struggle now has their goaltender, their starting goaltender on a Stanley Cup championship team. Jordan Binnington has been linked to the Oilers. The strongest speculations ties Binnington to Edmonton, and that the Oilers are also seeing if they can get a defenseman out of St. Louis at the same time. The potential deal would most likely be built around Stuart Skinner going back to St. Louis to team up with a Hall of Famer Hofer. Now, looking at this series, this is insane. We know the Edmonton Oilers have been looking at goaltenders. They looked at Colton Ellis before going to Buffalo, but what is your thoughts? Unless we're going to dive into exactly what a trade could look like and what this means for the Blues, but what is your initial thoughts on this article, which will be linked down below, on Binnington possibly going to Edmonton Oilers?
Well, on the surface, it makes sense that the Oilers would be involved in a goaltender, especially one like Jordan Binnington, who, has a great track record in big games, and the Oilers need a goalie that can come up big in those big moments because they're a team that went to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, and in last year's Stanley Cup final didn't know who their goaltender was on any given night. So that's something that they have to figure out. So on the surface, it makes sense, but we got to go all the way back. This is where we're at with this Blues team now. When we were talking about them in the offseason, we thought that, I don't know if they were going to be first. Didn't even predict them to be first in that Central Division. Maybe squeeze into the playoffs again, maybe a third divisional playoff spot. But at this point, this is where we're at. We're talking about selling off a lot of the older guys and even goaltenders at this point. And I think you can get a lot for Binnington at this point because we know what he brings to the table. And he can be streaky even throughout his career, right? He puts together like some incredible stretches. And then there's times like to start this season, he is horrifying to watch. So there's a lot of that. He brings that fire as well, as you can see on your screen here, right? He brings that to a team. Maybe the Oilers want a little bit more of that. So it definitely makes sense. And I think when you're looking at what Doug Armstrong has set up with him and Hofer, their contracts expire at the same time in 2 years. They're in the final years of their contract. I would imagine that they were going to move off of them at some point anyway, unless it was going fantastic and they were looking like perennial Stanley Cup winners every single year, which we know that wasn't necessarily going to be the case, right? So this is where we're at right now. We are talking about possibly trading Jordan Binnington. And when you look at the article too, there's two Blues in that picture as well. Like Stamkos makes sense. You're looking at a couple others. Tuck is a big question mark. There is two Blues in there. So they're, I think, at the forefront of all of this right now because they have a couple of veterans that a lot of teams would want. And one of them is a goaltender that I think Edmonton is salivating over right now because, there's connections there with even the Four Nations face-off with Connor McDavid as well. So pretty interesting stuff.
And I mean, the biggest thing is, like you said, you have two goaltenders locked up for this season and next with Hofer and going with Binnington at $6 million. But with these reports, it feels weird. Listen, taking back Stuart Skinner, that is just taking on a bad contract. We know almost an unplayable goaltender most nights, but I think the value here, and listen, I'm not going to sit here and say, listen, trade Binnington, it's smart. We don't want him because we do. We love him in the city. But the big thing is, looking at the Blues team, if you want to get younger, you have a younger goaltender that has struggled at times in Hofer that you can build in. Make your number one goaltender. Give him every night. He might throw a pizza up the middle of the ice, which allows them to score, but we know it's a young budding goaltender that can build with this team. Now, going in on Stuart Skinner, once again, I'm super down on this guy. I make it very obvious in every episode anywhere that Stuart Skinner is not a great goaltender, but the biggest thing is the Edmonton Oilers play very fast-paced and not a lot of defense, which we're seeing right now with the Blues to a sense. They don't even skate that fast some nights, but getting Stuart Skinner, you could do this trade earlier on, maybe recoup some value. Someone goes down for another team, they're looking for a backup goaltender, you flip Stuart Skinner. But Darius, before we get into the plus and exactly another defenseman that could be a part of this, do you think Stuart Skinner's a guy that maybe you bring in, he turns things around, or do you just flip him at deadline if you get this trade done sooner rather than later?
You can try and flip him, or maybe you're just taking him back to make the salary cap work, right? But he's not a solution for this team in any way. He would come in and be the automatic backup goaltender of this team. His contract expires at the end of the year, so maybe you re-sign him if you just want an NHL caliber goaltender. He's not the greatest NHL caliber goaltender. I mean, the fact that they went to back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals is a true testament to a guy like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl willing that team to win because he's just not a starting goaltender in this league. So he would come into the Blues and be a backup to Hofer, and Hofer would take over the reins in this scenario. But to go back to something very quickly too, like I don't want to trade Jordan Binnington first and foremost, but I think if it comes down to it, like, and the return is there, especially for a team as desperate as the Edmonton Oilers, I feel like you might have to pull the trigger at this point if it doesn't look like you're going to make the playoffs. So I think it's a real possibility that they have to look at it, but I wouldn't want to do it. I think Binnington, for the most part, is a fan favorite here. He's won a Stanley Cup, and you can rely on this goaltender for a big save when you need it. When there's guys around the league like a Connor Hellebuck, you can't say the same for him, right? Like when you need that save in that moment in the playoffs, who do you want in net right now across the league? It's probably Jordan Binnington for me. He did it so many times last year again when people were calling him washed, right? So it would suck to trade him, but at the same time, I think we're headed down a path here where they're going to have to at least consider it. And there's going to be teams that are desperate, like the Oilers, that would pull the trigger on it. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens if it is Skinner come the other way. Like maybe you re-sign him, maybe you try to flip him. I don't know who's taking that at that point. So you would probably have to retain his rights, that's for sure.
Because I think the big thing is, too, this could be a trade that could happen within the next month, but I think there's a big thing. We know Doug Armstrong is going to take Binnington on Team Canada going to the Olympics. Maybe you wait. You let him go in as the #1 goaltender. He has an incredible performance, which we seen last year, but going in with this, that could build the value of Jordan Binnington even more. We know this is a Blues team that lacks second-round picks over the next draft. They have extra picks in the 5th. They have an extra 4th next year, but this is a team that needs to add more young players, draft capital, and clear up some veterans on the team. Once again, not saying this should be Jordan Binnington because I love him on this team, but looking at the Oilers, they don't have a first this year. Maybe you go out to try to acquire a first-round pick, a prospect, take back Stuart Skinner. But with the report, Darius, going in quickly, they're looking for not only a goaltender with Jordan Binnington being linked, but they're looking at a defenseman as well. Now listen, we're going to do a full video on another name, a defenseman from this article, but quickly looking at this team, let's be obvious, there's one name in particular that's going to really stand out to Blues fans. Is Justin Falk the guy that we see the Blues move on if the Oilers are looking at acquiring multiple pieces?
He is the odd man out at this point. I mean, you are not getting Broberg back, that is for sure. And when you look up and down the lineup, like Mayu doesn't make any sense to move off of. Fowler doesn't make any sense, and you just re-signed him as well. Tyler Tucker doesn't make any sense. So the guy you land on if you're looking at defense is Falk, right? And he has been, okay at times, and you know what he is at this point in his career as well. So I think the Oilers could be interested in that. We know what he can bring in the playoffs. So I could see it being, something that they consider. You would have to make the salary cap work as well. There would have to be retained salary, but that's okay. You can eat some of that if you're the Blues. You have the space to do that. Like the Blues are in a good spot right now either way. If they start to pick it up, they can go out and make a move to add at the deadline or vice versa. They can sell and take on a bunch of money. So they're in a good spot. I think right now, either way, depending on how the rest of the season goes. But to me, odd man out is Falk for sure on the blue line.
But I mean, fans, what is your thoughts on this report? What is your thoughts on Binnington being linked to the Edmonton Oilers? We've seen Colton Ellis, as I said, to start the season before going on waivers. Now, Binnington's name is starting to heat up with multiple other Blues. I mean, you can see 2 in this report as well. What is your thoughts on all this? Go down and leave a comment down below. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, and I just tricked you because we're going straight into comments today. Coming from a Blues fan here in Brookhaven, Mississippi. Happy Turkey Day. I want to give a shout out to everyone watching this. Make sure to go down and leave a comment down below. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back in another episode, so keep your eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care, Blues fans.